heavy metal, not many bands can say they've achieved the same as Metallica. Known for their innovation and musical excellence, this iconic band has accomplished more than what any band would want. They have become a global phenomenon, and they've been around for more than 4 decades. At the heart of their thunderous sound and magnetic stage presence was Cliff Burton, the legendary bassist who played a pivotal role in shaping Metallica's early identity. But beyond his talents and style, there's more to Cliff Burton than you might know. While many fans may be familiar with the tragic circumstances surrounding his death, there is so much more to discover about this iconic figure. It started with the piano. One of the most iconic bass players in the world of heavy metal didn't actually start with a bass. Like James Hetfield, Cliff's first instrument was the piano. Cliff's introduction to the world of music was heavily influenced by his father, Ray Burton, a devoted classical music enthusiast. So naturally, he got Cliff into classical music at a young age too. Cliff's dad was the #1 person who encouraged and urged Cliff to start taking piano lessons. So as early as 6 years old, Cliff came into the world of classical music. Although he eventually joined a heavy metal band, he never forgot about his roots in classical music. Cliff only took up the bass because of his brother. Even though Cliff started with classical music, he got very enthusiastic about jazz and metal. His love for metal became more substantial because of his older brother, Scott, who was into the genre and played bass. Unfortunately, in 1975, Scott passed away after suffering a brain aneurysm. After the miserable event, Cliff decided that he would take up bass to pay homage to his older brother. According to their parents, Cliff said he'd be the best bassist for my brother. Cliff became so dedicated to mastering the bass that he would even reach a point when he wasn't learning anything new from his music tutors. He made it a point to practice for up to 6 hours a day, a practice that he continued to do even after joining Metallica and even up to the day he died. Cliff was in a band called Trauma before Metallica. A bass player as good as Cliff is bound to always be in a band. In fact, before he joined Metallica, he was in a band called Trauma. This was Cliff's first major band. James and Lars Ulrich actually found Cliff because of his former band. In 1982, James and Lars were looking for a replacement for Ron McGovney when they heard Cliff playing with Trauma and Whiskey A Go Go. They were instantly blown away by Cliff's bass playing, especially when he played the iconic Anesthesia solo. When asked about what they thought about Cliff the first time they watched him, James said, "We had to have him." Because of Cliff's skills, they asked him to join Metallica. Luckily, they asked him just in time because it was also around that time that Cliff was looking to leave his band Trauma due to creative differences. Cliff thought Trauma was becoming too commercial with his sound, so he felt that it'd be a good idea to join Metallica instead. After months of phone calls between Cliff and James and Lars, Cliff eventually accepted the offer to become Metallica's bassist on the condition that they moved to San Francisco. The San Francisco Bay Area was a thrash metal mecca thanks to Cliff. Although Cliff really wanted to join James and Lars' promising band, he didn't want to relocate to Los Angeles, where the band was situated at the time. He didn't want to leave his native San Francisco Bay Area behind. Since James and Lars were more than eager to have Cliff on board, they all decided to relocate to Cliff's place instead. If it wasn't for Cliff joining Metallica, they never would have been a Bay Area band. If it weren't for Cliff joining Metallica, there wouldn't be as big of a thrash metal scene in the San Francisco Bay Area. Both Exodus and Metallica were the bands that brought thrash metal to the area. And although Exodus was the pioneer of the Bay Area's thrash metal scene, Metallica's influence was undeniably bigger. He was unlike other bass players. When we think of bass players, we think of the band members who usually have a low profile. They don't usually tend to outshine the vocalists or the guitarists. However, Cliff was not like other bass players, and that is exactly what drew the other members of Metallica to him. Cliff wasn't afraid to stand out and say what he wanted. He was bold and confident, and that manifested itself in Metallica's albums with him in it. In many ways, Cliff Burton was a show stealer, not just as a bassist, but as a charismatic presence on stage. It was his approach to the bass and fearless spirit that made him an irreplaceable asset to Metallica. If you need any proof of how much Cliff stands out as a bass player, all you have to do is listen to Anesthesia pulling teeth. A 5-minute bass solo filled with distortion and overdrive. It's hard to see many bassists pulling that off. He brought a great deal of originality to Metallica. As mentioned earlier, Cliff became hooked on jazz and classical music at an early age. It's the heavy influence of these genres that helped Cliff bring originality to Metallica. In a genre often characterized by its power chords and pounding rhythms, Cliff brought a refreshing dose of complexity and sophistication. Cliff brought his clever use of melodies and interesting rhythms to Metallica's sound, all paired with his iconic bass playing. In fact, Cliff was so heavily influenced by these unusual genres, especially by Johann Sebastian Bach, that there are songs on Metallica's discography that have a resemblance to Bach's music, such as Damage Inc. It's Metallica's beautiful blend of heavy metal with other styles of music that makes them one of the most iconic heavy metal bands. So in essence, Cliff Burton's musical background and willingness to push boundaries helped redefine not only Metallica, but also what heavy metal could be. Cliff named Metallica's first album. After producing a whole album's worth of material as a band with Cliff, Metallica was ready to release their debut album. The band wanted a brutal and badass name and album cover to back up the songs that they had, but the original idea for the album was really Metal Up Your Ass. As for the album cover, it was supposed to be an image of a knife sticking out of a toilet. It's not exactly the kind of album name and cover we'd expect from Metallica. However, not everyone was on board with the bold choice. John Zazula, the founder of Megaforce Records, the band's then record label, expressed concerns about the album's marketability. He feared that the problematic imagery might stop record stores from stocking the album, potentially damaging its success. Upon hearing this issue with the album, Cliff simply said, "Just kill 'em all, man." And right there, he intentionally gave the iconic name to their first album. He has more writing credits than Kirk Hammett on Ride the Lightning. One of the most important albums in the world of thrash metal just happens to be Metallica's Ride the Lightning. What many don't realize is that Cliff has made a major contribution to the album. The album was significant to him. On this album, Cliff's credited for 6 songs, namely Fight Fire with Fire, Ride the Lightning, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Fade to Black, Creeping Death, and The Call of Cthulhu. On the other hand, Kirk Hammett, the band's lead guitarist, only had 4 credits on this album. This surprising statistic highlights just how influential Cliff's musical vision was during the creation of Ride the Lightning. In addition to these iconic songs on the album, Cliff has 4 more Metallica tracks credited to his name: Anesthesia Pulling Teeth, Damage Inc., Master of Puppets, Orion, as well as the posthumously released To Live Is to Die. Cliff is the secret weapon of Metallica. If you still haven't figured it out at this point, Cliff is actually Metallica's secret weapon. One of the main reasons why he's the band's secret weapon is his approach to the bass. As we previously mentioned, he's unlike any other bass player. More importantly, Cliff was the secret weapon because he was the life and soul of Metallica. His unmistakable technique and style had made the records he played on even better than many could imagine. Cliff perfectly complemented James's guitar playing. He knows that he can stand out, but he knows when to do so and when to stay back. He brings life to the songs in a way that lets you know his bass lines were not mere accompaniments. They were integral to the very sound of Metallica. Above all, his death didn't stop his influence on the band, though. The band continued to take on a classical influence in their sound. Although they've changed as the years progressed to have a more commercially acceptable sound, Cliff's influence cannot be denied. His spirit has carried and continues to carry them on through their career. Knowing just how much Cliff influenced Metallica makes us think about what would have become of the band if he were still alive. That we cannot know for sure. However, we cannot deny the influence he has, not only on Metallica, but on the next generations of bass players. From his humble beginnings that started in classical music to his transformation into a bass genius, Cliff's short but meaningful career was marked by his unwavering dedication, passion, and connection to the music he created. Even in his tragic absence, Cliff continues to be Metallica's secret weapon. Even though Metallica has reached new heights and fulfilled many endeavors, Cliff's spirit remains a force that brings Metallica forward.